In the Bookshelf with me, Ryan Tubridy, is brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. And Eason have a rich heritage of book selling since 1886. It's probably where you got your first ever book, or maybe your last one, and hopefully your next one after you listen to this episode of our podcast. So stay listening for Ryan Recommends, of course, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss a book I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. And make sure to browse your local Eason store for your next book, or explore hundreds of thousands of titles online at easons.com. Order before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch and enjoy free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Whether you're after the latest bestseller, a hidden gem, or a classic read, Eason has you covered. Eason, be inspired. Today on the Bookshelf, welcome. We are joined by a giant of the music world, Mr. Gary Lightbody. Let's give a bit of background to Gary, if I may. The frontman of Snow Patrol. He's written some of the most iconic songs of the past 2 decades, from the anthemic Run to the timeless Chasing Cars. But beyond the stage and the studio, Gary is a passionate writer and just one of life's storytellers. It's something we do so well on the island of Ireland, with a brand new book, an album that's been out for a little while, but it's terrific. We have so much to talk about. We're going to talk about the book from Gary's childhood, the book that changed his life, and the book that brought him joy. Gary, welcome. It's good to see you again. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. It's great to see you, as always.
Give us a sense of you as a young lad, because I always like to try and get an idea of what sort of a boy you were. And I'm talking kind of before 12. 12 things changed. So what were you like?
Shy. Painfully shy, sensitive, but yeah, before 12, I discovered, when I was 11 or 10, I discovered heavy metal.
Yeah.
So that changed things a wee bit.
You just took a massive leap from shy.
I went shy, sensitive, heavy metal.
Okay.
That's the youth.
I want to get.
So you want to go before heavy metal?
No. I'm gonna hold that beautiful thought and come back to it in a moment. I want to get a sense of the house and who's in it and what's happening.
My mum and dad, and my sister and me.
Okay.
So the 4 of us.
And in terms of what your mum and dad were doing for a living or with life.
My dad was in the civil service, and my mum was a housewife up until the point when me and my sister failed our 11 plus, and my mum didn't want us to go to the high school, so they had to pay for me to go to secondary school and my sister to go to secondary school. My mum ended up working 3 jobs to put us through school.
Okay.
So my dad was a civil servant, mum was a housewife, but that's. My mum ended up working,
because you let her down so
because I let her down
grotesquely.
so drastically, and I've never lived down the shame of it, and that's why I'm here today to talk about it.
You've cast a load of flies in the water, and we're going to eat each one like a plump trout. But let's stick in the house. Then.
In the house,
were there bookshelves? Were you read to? Were you interested in reading? Was it a local library? Was it a bookshop? Where are the words coming from? Again, pre heavy metal.
In the pre heavy metal, the early days, it was Hardy Boys.
Okay.
Probably, yeah. Some mystery where they were trying to find something, and then they invariably did.
Yeah.
And everything was fine at the end.
Yeah.
So that was probably my first foray into reading on my own.
And
I can't remember. I'm sure I was read to, but I can't. When people talk about sort of iconic store books they were read to as a kid, I don't have those memories. Yeah. Whether that doesn't mean they weren't there. I have a terrible memory.
Yeah.
So, but I don't remember being read to. I'm doing my mum a terrible disservice if she did, but I don't remember it.
Don't worry, I get the sense from what you just said. Your mum's going to come out of this story really well.
She's going to come out of it great.
So don't worry about your mum.
She is going to come out of it great. Yeah. She is an absolute diamond.
When did you first hear heavy metal music, or
friends at school.
Yeah.
For going into school for my first year at school, my mates started listening to heavy metal, and then I started getting into it, and I just connected to it like immediately.
Yeah.
Iron Maiden, Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera, Centrix, the classics, and hard rock as well. I mean, AC/DC, we're in there too. But But yeah, there was something that just was completely different from everything that I'd grown up with in the house.
Yeah.
So in the house, the radio might have been on, usually news from when my dad was in the house. But when he wasn't in the house, it was pop radio. And so it was Madonna and Michael Jackson and, the Lionel Richie, all the kind of pop hits of the day. And I loved that when I was little, but then I kind of wanted to find my own music. And there was only a handful of records in the house. There was only a handful of vinyl. And they were all country and western or country music. Yeah. There was maybe 8 records, and they were all country apart from one record, which was the London, I want to say Symphony Orchestra, but it might have been something else, Philharmonic maybe been in there, but play the songs of Lennon McCartney. So there was one Beatles record, and it wasn't them. It wasn't the Beatles.
It was Beatle-ish.
Yeah.
But yet you were getting your hands on even that was enough to get the sense of melody and orchestration and instrumentalism.
100%. Those Beatles songs lived in me before I even heard them.
They were embedded.
Yeah. Because they weren't really, I mean, maybe they were on the radio, but I didn't hear them, in the sense that by then, by the 1980s, they were kind of mostly playing the kind of pop of the day on sort of radio,
Yes.
whatever the normal radio stations were.
So that gives us a great sense of the kind of limited music, but still important in the vinyl
I love
collection.
country music now, but then I was like, that was whatever was in the house that when I got to 11 or 12, that's what I was repelled by.
Yes.
At the time, that was the jet propulsion away to whatever else is out there.
Yeah.
And the first thing I hit in that rocket ship was heavy metal.
Heavy metal. Okay.
But now I love country music. Yeah.
I want to jump to that bit where you said the shy kid. So time you meet a heavy metal fan, well, once upon a time, they looked kind of big and a lot of hair, and you would have thought a bit menacing, if you like, at first. And then you talk to them, they're nothing of the sort.
The sweetest guys.
That's right.
The sweetest people that I've met. Most of the metalers that I've ever met in my life are the sweetest people. Not
Soft.
to say, but metal's a great place to be sometimes.
Let's go to the book from your childhood. We ask you to pick 3 books from your life, and the childhood book is.
I didn't get that memo because these are all recent ones.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I appreciate that. So will we go with the Hardy Boys from the childhood then?
Yeah, sure.
As being the book
pick
that.
whatever one at random.
Okay, but while we're here, I want to talk. When I talk to people about books and life generally, often they talk about the teacher. And we could call this podcast The Teacher, because there's always one whose name they remember very well because they were the teacher who changed things dramatically in a way that they had no idea in the moment, and probably even to this day, the effect that they had. And you have one such teacher, don't
I do,
you?
and I'll change my childhood book then.
Okay.
If that's all right.
This is a very organic version of the podcast.
A little bit later than the age you're talking about.
Okay.
I probably 14 years old at school, Campbell, in Belfast, and a new teacher started, a fella from Coleraine, Mr. McKee, and I think it was in his first week. I wasn't. I mentioned all this in the book, but I wasn't the greatest student, and I never was at school the greatest student. But there was something about him that was just different from everybody else. He just, like, he was talking about Bob Dylan as well. You know what I mean? He was talking about Van Morrison.
Yeah.
And
Seamus Heaney.
And then he talked about Seamus Heaney and started reading the poem Diggin' from the first poem from his first collection, was called Death of a Naturalist. And literally there is the moment where the penny dropped.
Yeah.
Like in the reading of that poem by him, where I suddenly started to listen in school for the very first time properly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mum. But it was everything just became clear. I went, oh, what? You can use language like this. You're allowed to use words like the words can sound like this. It can make you feel like you're there in the moment. I felt like I was actually there. I felt like I could smell the peat and hear the blade cutting, and I just hadn't heard literature come to life like that before because I hadn't been listening. It was just the right moment for me. And then after that, I spoke to him after class. I went to him after class and spoke to him, and he was like, well, you should maybe write something, and see how it goes, and I'll, like bring it to me, and so I would write poems and I would bring them to him, and he would give me some notes, and then I would bring him more, and then as time went on, he was like, I think you should send this to an anthology and try and get it published. And I was published at 15 in anthologies and 16. And so there's a few out there. Please don't go and read them.
In fact, today no,
actually,
no. But what a lovely thing for a teacher. That's above his pay grade. Taking you aside and saying, and do you see him still around the place?
He's not teaching at the school anymore. My friend Davey, his son, went to Campbell there. So Davey and I were in class together. We were in his class together. It's kind of where we met in a way.
Yeah.
Because I'm Lightbody, he's Matchett, Davey Matchett.
Yeah.
So we were put alphabetically. And Davey Matchett and myself run a record company today. We run a management company.
Amazing.
We've been the best of friends for
what a creative
35
moment.
years. And his son went to Campbell, and him and Mr. McKee, Mark is his name.
Yeah.
Feels weird to call your teacher by the first name, but
I never want to hear the word Mark again.
Yeah, Mr. McKee is the right way to do it. But they became friends. I guess he's now a dad, and so there's like but they became friends, and I got to hang out with him, had a few cups of coffee, and he would come sometimes to the shows and certain events and stuff, and I would always single him out, and embarrass him.
Isn't that what a every kid needs a Mr. McKee in their life. That's the truth of it, because you weren't getting that at home. I take it you weren't being nurtured in that way. I don't mean I don't mean that pejoratively.
No, not. Yeah, very very lucky to have the parents that I had. But it wasn't an artistic house.
Yeah,
no.
Your dad was very straight. Is that it, or conservative?
He was strict. My mom and dad were pretty strict. Yeah, growing up, and then we got to like 17, and they realized that I was out drinking.
Yeah,
and they could have the reaction that some parents might have in that situation, which is to say that you're not allowed to do that. But they went the other way, and they would host our parties. So my mom and dad became legendary to our friends, and all our mates love my dad, my mom and dad.
Yeah,
and so many of them were at the funeral. When he passed.
Of course.
They were such big fans of his.
Was there aggro? Was there a sort of a time where you rebelled? I mean,
that book is essentially about that. Which is the arguments that I had with him.
What were you fighting over or about?
Politics mainly. He was very conservative, and I was very liberal, although I didn't really know that at the time. And I sort of his arguing with him, contrary to what he wanted it to yield, was actually making me more liberal. Rather than
yes.
So my first rebellions were against him, as most people's first rebellions are against their parents. So and as was mine, and he saw the world differently from me, and he wanted me to see the world the way he wanted me to see the world the way he saw it.
Yes.
And I couldn't countenance it. That was most of our arguments, and then my mum would end up referee.
Tell me about the 3 jobs your mum did.
Yes, so she worked in an off license, a very sketchy off license, a couple of very sketchy off licenses.
Sketchy off license.
Yeah,
I like the sound of it.
Well, I mean, people that would come. She was she only recently started telling stories about it, where people would be like there'd be like a few people outside when she was opening the door, and I'm like, right, okay, I get what you're up to.
Yeah.
Various other shops and things like that. You know what I mean?
And she did that to put you through.
Did that to put me through secondary school, and then my sister failed Turl M plus as well, and she did the same for her. Obviously, you know what I mean. It was not to be. She wasn't going to just do it for one of her children. And then my dad retired from his job. He had a health scare at 59. He was told that if he didn't, if he didn't cut the stress and cut the cigarettes, he'd be dead in 6 months.
Okay.
And he needed a heart bypass as well. So my mum kind of covered, a lot of work in that as well. And then he set up his own business doing the same thing, but just in his own time.
Yeah.
And then towards the end of my dad's work, he would never stop working. I kept saying to him, you don't have to work because I could. And he's like, no, I'll be working.
So you're talking about when the band had become a success.
Yes.
And you were in a position to say,
I wanted to go, you don't have to work anymore. I'll take care of it. And he wouldn't hear of it.
Why not?
Because
Pride?
that pride word that we were talking about earlier on.
Too proud. We might come back to that, but I do want to ask you about the book that changed your life. Did you find yourself
again?
You can pick any book you like, Gary. I'm tempted to be like Mr. McKee, saying, "Did you do your homework, Gary?" But maybe we.
I just wanted to talk about these 3 amazing books from Northern Irish and North of Ireland.
I noticed that they were all Northern Irish. Thinking, does he read anything beyond the?
I'm so passionate about literature from Ireland in general.
Yeah, sure.
But the book that changed my life, it was probably either Gatsby or Catcher in the Rye, two absolute classics.
Yeah.
You could probably throw To Kill a Mockingbird in there as well if you want to, but those are kind of classic life-changing books.
Okay, so we got Gatsby, Scott Fitzgerald.
Strayed too far from the normal path of like people getting their lives changed by books, but there we are.
I mean, these are great classic books, and when you think of those books, how would you describe them as life-changing? Do you think, or
well, it's funny because I link Catcher in the Rye to another book, but by a guy called Brian Charles, called Grab Onto Me Tightly as If I Know the Way.
Right.
One of the most extraordinary books, but it's kind of like Catcher in the Rye for the 1990s grunge world.
Great.
But there's a line in it where he sort of meets a girl and he kind of immediately falls in love with her, and he says, this is the internal sort of thought mechanism the author's using, but he says something is happening here. And when I read that line, it's so simple, and yet it just made my heart swell that like into my shoulder blades. And I've used that line so many times in my life when I've felt like that. I've literally said it out loud to people.
It's a big moment.
Yeah, something is happening here. It just feels like that sentence itself triggers something in me that
I'm thinking of Buffalo Springfield. There's something happening here.
Yeah.
But it isn't exactly clear.
But it's a new context for it, for me.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I love that. What Heaney did for you with lyricism and words and falling in love with, you so described that beautiful. It was almost like a tangible moment where you went, words, lyrics.
Yes.
I love that. Thanks to Mr. McKee.
Yes.
And his introduction, because then he was talking to you about Dylan and Morrison, who would have been a near neighbor in a way, Van Morrison, in the sense that, which is beautiful. But then we go to the musicality, and I think as Nirvana was your bolt out of the sky, where you might have heard it or seen it. I think you went to the gig and you must have thought there's something happening.
Yes.
Is that right?
I was that 16-year-old, like the character in Grab Onto Me Tightly, saying something is happening here. That was me in that moment.
Was it?
Literally 16 years old.
Take us there. What was happening?
So I'd heard the album Nevermind. I write about it in the book. Everybody's heard that album. But the first time, the day that it came out, my friend Mark went to the record store in break time from school and managed to listen to the first half of the album in the classes in the afternoon. So he was probably sitting in the back of the class listening to it.
With the little headphones.
Yes, with the headphones. And then we got on the bus to go home. He lived near me in Bangor. And he gave me one half of the headphones.
Now, these weren't, just to remind people, these weren't these handy. Yeah. This was the little orange.
The orange ones. And you had to turn it. You had to be Jeff Capes to turn the thing round. So we're straining against each other. Physics is not on our side. And I'm holding this thing to my ear like it's going to fly off at any second. And so he'd listened to the first half of the tape. Yeah. And the second half of the tape starts with the song Territorial Pissings. And it's, come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try and love one another right now. And then it starts with this chaos and guitars and sounding like Thor is lighting up the sky and, got to find a way, a better way. And it just, everything, the same as hearing Heaney's words, hearing that music, hearing those words, hearing that sound, just, it felt like I'd everything in my body had been changed into fire, lightning, chaos. But I knew that something was different.
Yeah.
And then the next year, I think Nevermind came out in 91, and the next year they played in Belfast, 1992. And it was Nirvana, Teenage Fan Club, and the Breeders.
Yeah.
One of the greatest lineups of all time.
Yeah.
And that gig was just seeing them on stage, seeing that it was real, seeing that feeling that I'd had on that day, on that bus home from school, and every day after that, listening to the album, seeing it come to life was overwhelming. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew the one thing I did know was I want to do that. Like
all roads.
I want to do that.
God.
I knew it was probably inaccessible, but I couldn't live the rest of my life without trying. And that's what I did a long time.
What did you want?
Trying.
Listen, we go to the grave trying, right? And learning. Yeah. But what did you want when you were watching it? Did you want the adulation?
No.
Did you want to be the musicians making this extraordinary music?
I wanted to be the one making the noise.
Why?
Because that's the only thing I wanted was the noise. I wanted to make the noise. I wanted to be in the noise. I wanted other people to make noise around me. I wanted to just be in the noise. I wanted that noise to define the rest of my life.
Where did that...
Didn't want quiet ever again.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. I do now. Well, ironically, I can't have it because I'm tinnitus, but
Be careful what you wish for. Yeah. You don't have tinnitus, do you?
Yeah, but it's something that most musicians have. It's not,
I know.
Yeah.
And how do you cope with it? Or
you just have to ignore it. There's no cure.
Okay, don't. Yeah. Sometimes just don't even talk about it.
Yeah. It's like Fight Club.
So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. I'm going to go for something a little more contemporary this week. It's Michael Wolff. The book is called All or Nothing. And this book tells you all a bit about how Trump got elected in 2024 and how he got to the White House for a second time. So whether you like Trump or dislike Trump, it doesn't really matter. The point is, how did he do it? Now, this book covers a lot of legal territory because of all the court cases. So sometimes it gets mired down a bit there. But it's kind of gossipy, it's kind of tabloidy, with a little erudite twist in the middle of it all. My favourite kind of reading, to be honest with you. So it takes you on that mad odyssey. It puts the odd in Odyssey. It's a great little book. If you want to get a bit more informed on what's happening on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., that's the recommendation for you this week, all right? Right, that's it. Let's get back to the chat. You're pointing at the stage, you're going, that's it. That's what I want. We've had Heaney for the words, we've had Nirvana for the music, and now the pursuit of noise. This happy world of noise and immersive world of noise is there. And you've got to be hungry for that, and you've got to be ambitious. And these aren't words I'm hearing listening to your story about your folks, apart from your mum, actually, the 3 jobs, that ambition for her children. But what about... So what about... you're shy on one hand, but you're metaler on the other. I'm trying to find out where does that twain meet for you to decide I want to go up on stage and maybe in due course play in arenas full of people because I trust myself.
Well, I never thought for a second that would happen.
Did you not?
I just thought I just want to be like, I wasn't that, like, it was in the King's Hall. They don't really have gigs in the King's Hall anymore, but most of the gigs, it's a little bit bigger than the Ulster Hall, but most of the gigs are in the Ulster Hall. But but I didn't think I was going to be on a stage that big. I just knew I just want to be. I think it was more like them. I want to be them. I want to be them.
Them, not the crowd.
The crowd didn't factor into it because I didn't think that like when I picture myself, like when I'm 16 or 17, picturing myself in a band, I'm not picturing a vast sea of people. Yeah. That's how little kind of confidence I had that this would ever work. You know what I mean?
So was it all a terrible accident?
Everything. I went on holiday by mistake. Yeah. It was. Yeah. I think it was. And I'm glad that it was, because I was never really expecting anything. I think towards the end, we're skipping ahead, and I don't want to, but to like when we got signed to a major label and we made Final Straw, and we had 10 years of struggling, and all the reviews came out and we were finally great reviews.
Yeah.
And everybody was saying this is going to be massive, and it wasn't for the first 6 months. I think then, and people around me told me, you know what I mean, you want to maybe just stop being so grumpy. I think then I felt like beaten up by the process.
Did you?
Because it was 10 years later by then, and I thought, well, no, it's definitely not going to happen now, because we've had all this backing now. We never had the backing before. But standing as a 16-year-old, going, I want to do that. If that 16-year-old had ever thought that they'd get to make eight albums of Snow Patrol, 2 albums of Tired Pony, 2 albums of Reindeer Section, write with lots of different artists all around the world, sell 17 million albums. There's no chance. No chance.
There's only one of us in this room that can say the last sentence.
Yeah, but to the 16-year-old kid, he still thinks I'm mental.
Is he still there?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that, you know, my therapist one time said that all the years that we have lived are in our mind somewhere, because we'll have an argument with our parents, and suddenly we're 16 years old again and go, no, Mom, you know what I mean? So there's that in there. So like sometimes, like when I was writing this and I was writing about that moment of the gig, I felt an empathy towards him that maybe I wasn't really aware of him, you know, but when you're writing about him, maybe you sort of bring it to life, you know.
Do you write better when you're madly in love or when your heart is broken?
Heart's broken.
Why?
Who has the time for it when you're madly in love? Who has the time for doing anything but being in love? I don't understand how anyone can write about love when they're in love.
Because
what are you doing? Why are you not with the person you're in love? Go and swim in the sea and go on holiday and read to each other and be in each other's arms.
And enjoy being in love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't be writing.
So take us to the heartbreaking bit then.
Oh, what? Which one?
Well, I'm not talking about individual people. I'm asking you, obviously.
No, exactly. Which heartbreak? I'm not talking about which person. But
No, I mean, I'm not. I'm simply saying, if your heart's broken, it clearly has an influential factor in your life, especially yours as a lyricist and as a poet, as a writer, as a songwriter. How does it work? I mean, you're brokenhearted, which means you're probably blue, to say the least, and your heart's broken. For a lot of people, that means I can't work, I can't think straight. I'm in the shadows. But you can.
Well, no, for sure. I mean, I think there's a period of time where you're not fit to write. But you come out of that. You come out of that time. There's a sort of you finally sort of find the off ramp out of it. And you can start to write about what happened. And all of the songs that I've ever written about heartbreak, it's always me. I'd say 95% of it. I think when I was younger, I was maybe a little angrier, but it's usually me that I'm writing about my dysfunction, my inability to be in a relationship. You know, that sort of terrible cliche of, you know, commitment phobe or whatever, you know.
Do you think if you had followed your dad's footsteps and had become a civil servant, that you'd be married with a few kids or what have you?
Yeah, I wouldn't have followed his footsteps in terms of being a civil servant. I don't think I was on the road to be a teacher.
Yes.
I did a degree in English and history, and then dropped history, even though history is what I read mostly now, still. But I'm glad I dropped it at uni, because then it became my passion. And I did history and philosophy, English and philosophy, excuse me. And I was going to be an English teacher. But with a name like Lightbody, how would I have ever survived?
Never.
I barely survived school with a name like Lightbody. There's no chance. First day, Mr. Lightbody written on the board. That's it. You've lost.
That's it, Mr. Lightbody. Yeah.
You can't.
And you got to remember talking to Frank McCourt about his book Teacher Man, and he said, you know, the way he said, you as a teacher going into a classroom, you don't go in ready. You go in with your nose up and you smell. You smell what they're going to do to you, and you have to you have to let them know who's boss fast. So Mr. Lightbody would have to, be in charge of that room for sure. No, I'm not, but anyway, music's gain is teaching's loss, and that changed everything. In your book, you write very elegantly but heartbreakingly about your dad. And you were, what age were you when your dad died?
He died in 2019. I would have been, I'm 48 now, 5 years, 43.
43. And it knocked you over the head like a sledgehammer. I don't think I can recall anyone articulating just the pain of it. If it's not too glib a question, why did it hit you so hard? Or can I ask you that? Or like, what happened? I mean, you really got it hurt you and it hit you.
Yeah, but it hurt in a way that surprised me because I couldn't feel the hurt.
Yeah,
I just imagined that's what I was feeling because I was so numb.
How old was he?
He was 83.
And would you describe yourself as having been friends? I mean, were you?
Yes. Yeah.
Close?
Him and I argued the bit out for a long time, but there was also a lot of, and that's what a lot of the book is about, me trying to come to terms with the fact that I never said sorry for all that. But what maybe isn't said in the book, there was an awful lot of times when he was so funny and we laughed so much together. And when I finally wised up and stopped arguing with him, took him a little bit of time.
Yeah.
He would still go for it. And I would just change the subject. And because he was 40 when he had me. So he was already set in his ways. You know what I mean? I understand that. Yeah. He was born before the Second World War. Yes. Like I say in the book, you know what I mean? His teenage years were the 1950s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's a product of his time.
Even have the 60s to shake him up a bit. So
will you tell them about the you told me a little earlier about the ice cream van? And
yes, no. Well, I mean, he
just
would
illustrate because I think it really humanizes him. This story.
Yeah, no. I mean, he was very human. He was very funny, but I also found out that quite a few of his jokes were the jokes that I thought that were his were not his. He took them from Morecambe and Wise, and when any time a cop car would go past, he would say, "You're never going to sell ice cream going that fast." I thought my dad was this storm wizard with the jokes, and and then I saw the episode of Morecambe and Wise that had that in it. I was like, "I got a minute, what's going on here?" But yeah, no, he was like he was always like the. I didn't know this at the time. I wouldn't have been able to use this reference for most of the time, but he's like the Godfather. You know what I mean? Which you don't watch when you're a kid, but you realize later in life, he'd walk into a restaurant and we'd walk to wherever the table was. The person showing you the table, you'd walk over and you'd sit down at the table. Then you turn around and you realize that my dad was talking to everybody at every table,
shaking the hand,
going, "Hey, how's it going? You all right? What's that? That looks good. Hey, I wouldn't be having that pudding." He would literally be like saying to people, like you'd be like slapping your head, going, "Christ Almighty, what are you doing?" So he was always the life and soul, and he would always chat to everybody.
Mm.
And, like when you're a teenager, you're like, "Oh, Dad."
Yeah.
Because you couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Because he would just be like chatting to every single person that he passed.
Yeah.
But yeah, that he was really hilarious. And yeah.
It took you, I think, a year before you really let it out and cried.
Yeah,
I cried.
I didn't know how
to. You were numb, obviously, and to it in some ways, but also when a parent dies, father in an old-fashioned way, the son is anointed as the doer. You got to fix this and you got to do that, and you got to, particularly in these days soon after you talk about, you were suddenly organizing funerals and different things, and suddenly you have to step up to the occasion. Why did it take so long for tears to fall?
I don't know. I think they were just trapped in there. I didn't know, because also what happened to the world at that time, like it was December 2019,
COVID.
So then by February, March 2020, everybody was in lockdown. So, and my sister, this is how our family communicate in terms of like emotionally communicate, where we don't really talk about stuff. My sister, she shows up for everybody, like my dad showed up for everybody. She just shows up for the people that she loves. She's always there. Like, you call her, she's like, I'll be there. It's not like, well, I'm busy right now. It's just everything gets dropped and she's there. And she never really asks for anything.
Wow.
And this is how I knew she was going through it, was I was going to LA to write for February, and I was going to be coming back at the end of February. And the day before I left, my sister went, can I come with you? And she'd never come out. I'd lived off and on in LA for 10 years, and I'd asked her to come and visit, and she never did. She didn't want to get in the flight, the 10-hour flight. And she's like, can I come with you? And I was like, of course. Like, we flew out together, and we spent 2 weeks together there, and then she left, and I stayed on to the end of February working. And then it locked up. Like, I was going back, but the day before I was going back, we were locked down. So I was in LA for a while. But anyway, that's a different story. But it it happened to the world, and I didn't really think that it was appropriate for me to then be like, oh, well, I can't bring my grief in here. Said in the book, I can't bring my grief into this. I have to leave it behind me. So it got deferred again. So the numbness kind of got elongated, and I'm not blaming anything.
But that's
anybody.
That's deferred is a good word.
But it then took a long time for me to sort of find my way back to it, and it was one particular trigger that got me there, and I'm very grateful.
Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it was a Rumi poem. Beyond all right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field. Or I think it might be beyond all notion of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. It still has an effect on me, I have to say. Yeah, I just saw it at the right time. I think I'd probably seen it before. It's a pretty famous quote from him. But I think we see things, we truly see things when we're meant to.
Yeah.
And that unlocked everything. And yeah, the floodgates opened.
For a long time?
Well, I was always an emotional person. I mean, I wasn't like always crying, but I knew where the tears were. You know what I mean? It's like they were found pretty easy, and then for a year not to cry, it was very, very strange.
Yeah.
I felt disconnected from myself. I felt like there was malfunction. It was just like in a submarine when things go badly wrong, like those noises, mer, mer, like that was just happening inside my body. It was like, but I couldn't do anything about it.
Amazing.
So and then when I cried again, and again, it was words, it was literature, it was, it's funny how all this is connected, how all the most sort of pivotal moments in my life are kind of connected to literature and words and poetry and music. And then I started to write again, which I hadn't written anything.
It's beautiful because, when you wrote the album, you've said, we spoke before, and you said, I had so much more to say in some ways, which is why this book is here, because it's a companion piece to the album, but it's also unfinished business from the album. I think there's probably one way of putting it. I said, I was trying to use the analogy of running in a race and running past the post and going, yay. And then you offered
well, I said I Forrest Gumped it.
You Forrest Gumped it.
Yeah.
And you were gumping because you couldn't stop running and you couldn't stop writing. But catharsis, surely.
Yes, no, for sure. I hadn't ever experienced the words of a song spilling over the edges of the song. I'd never experienced that before.
Yeah.
Leonard Cohen was a great, Michael Stipe. These are extraordinary figures in music that write copious verses and choruses for their songs. I know this to be true of Michael Stipe because Jack Knife Lee, who was our producer for 20 years, a wonderful, wonderful man, worked with REM on their 2 last albums. And he said that Michael would just write and write and write and write and then find the song in there.
Wow.
And it would just sort of become clear to him, like where the song lived in that prose. Whereas I write the melody first. Johnny, Nathan and myself write the music first. And then the words come. I sit down and I write the words. And usually I write to within the boundary line of the song. I never thought to cross that boundary. I never thought in my life, like, why keep going? The song's done. But I just felt every time I finished the song, I would be like, oh, there's another verse, there's more, this isn't even a verse, this feels like something else. And that's how the book grew out of. Yeah. And then I didn't even realize it, but I'd started writing about my father and I didn't realize how they were so connected.
Yes.
And that's why those two things are deeply connected in the book, and they flash backwards and forwards.
Have you given a copy to Mr. McKee?
I haven't. That's got to be top of your agenda.
You're a busy man, but it's going to happen.
I have to get him a copy. Yeah,
for sure. The book, the last book of the three, is the book that brought you joy. If you can think of one.
Can I just talk about these three books?
Let's do it. These are the books that have brought you joy. I love this. Let's do it.
Is that all right? I've totally broken your.
No, it's not. We are not constricted. We are open minded. And I like this. This is nice. It's a bit different. I think there is a
moment in Irish literature in general and Northern Irish literature, from there I've deeply connected to the place that's happening right now that has, honestly, I think it's like a golden age.
Great.
And Michael McGee, Close to Home, Jan Carson, The Firestarters, and Louise Kennedy, Trespasses are three extraordinary novels that tell, that show Belfast in three very different ways, and yet it's so intrinsically, each one is so intrinsically Belfast.
Yes.
And I kind of understand the Belfast of The Firestarters a little bit more. It's from a kind of an East Belfast kind of a way, with the school in East Belfast, dare I say Protestant kind of a way. I'm not religious, but that was kind of my upbringing.
Yeah, you could identify.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the world of Close to Home by Michael McGee is on the more sort of Catholic side of Belfast.
Yeah.
And it's a world I didn't really know very well. To my shame, to my eternal shame, I read that book and was like, this is my city, and I feel like I'm being shown my city for the first time in a lot of ways. And
what an achievement for the author!
It's an extraordinary book, and the same as I read Close to Home first, and I read the other two, and kind of in that order. There was Trespasses as well. It's just it's really, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I mean, you can't read that book and not have your absolute world smashed to pieces. But in on every page, there's such great writing. And with Jan Carson's book, The Firestarters, there's a line in the first. I actually mentioned, that's another reason why I wanted to talk about those books, because the two of them are mentioned in my book.
Yes.
The Firestarters and Trespasses. But there's a line in in the Firestarters' early doors where it said, looking at Belfast, Belfast is like a square from one side and a circle from the other.
Yeah.
To stare at it would make you go blind.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I just think it's one of the most extraordinary and apt things ever said about Belfast. It really is.
Yeah.
It's a city of definite incongruities, but so much heart, so much soul, been through so much.
Yeah.
And these three books show Belfast in three very different ways. But if you want to get to know, if you've never been and you want to get to know Belfast more, or if you live there and like me, you want to see Belfast from a different angle, I would highly recommend.
That's a lovely choice, a lovely trilogy of books there that people can, as you say, get to know the city and the place generally and the history, because a lot of the characters in the books you've talked about bring a lot of baggage that is
for sure
inflicted on them by society, by history, by politics, by religion.
Absolutely.
That they got those lotto numbers in life, and unfortunately that's where they are. But great choice. Love that. We also ask a question, Gary, before we say goodbye, which is, now I know you've written an autobiography, but what is the name of the autobiography you haven't written yet? And this is for looking for a title of the book that tells your story up to now, because even in the gap of having written about yourself before, there must be things have happened. And have you changed it? Have you evolved? Or are you sticking to your guns with the original title, or what have you got?
Shambles. I think that would be the name of my autobiography.
Have we another hour on the clock, lads? Explain, please.
Yeah, no, I think I'm so disorganized. I'm Nathan Connolly and Johnny McDade are my brothers in Snow Patrol,
Sure.
and two of the most extraordinary people I've ever known, and I love sharing my life with them. But Nathan in particular is like one of the neatest people you'll ever meet in your life. Like, you go to his like hotel room on tour or whatever, and everything will be. It looks like the cleaners have just been in or whatever, but he will have cleaned it again when they arrive. And you go to my like,
Yeah.
God bless Nathan if he's ever in my room. He must be feeling like just sort of levels of panic that you shouldn't be. If he's wearing one of those heart rate monitor things that everybody seems to be wearing these days, if you tell him you need to go to a hospital. Yeah, my room just looks like there's been an explosion in it. My room's a mess. It always is. My house is a mess. Yeah, everything's.
How about your life?
A mess. My life is less of a mess these days, but I think Shambles definitely.
Shambolic.
Shambolic. Yeah, shambolish.
Are you happy these days in life, by the way? I mean, how are you doing, broadly speaking?
Yeah. Broadly speaking, yeah. I'm loving being on tour again. It's been a minute since we've been properly on tour. We've done festivals every year since the last tour, but it's great playing festivals. It's great, and you get to meet a lot of people. You get to see a lot of bands. But being on tour is that's the real fun, because it becomes this like gang, and this just protective shell forms around you. You feel like it's us against the world, and we love feeling like we're like just together, and we can we get to play music with each other every night. It feels like it feels timeless. It feels like you're no age again.
And you're back in the noise.
Yeah, back in the noise again. So it's really funny and fun. We do have a lot of laughs. And our crew are wonderful, wonderful human beings. We have quite a few bands that have played with us recently on the tour so far, and they're always coming up to us going, "Oh my God, your crew are so lovely to us."
Yeah.
It's what we learned from U2. Write about U2 in the book a little bit. Write about Bono. We played with U2 in 2005 on the Vertigo tour, and then again on the 360 tour, and it was like being in it was like going to rock school, like learning how to play a stadium, because we didn't know how to do it.
Right.
We literally went from 10 years of playing in bars or playing in clubs to 20 people.
Wow.
And then Final Straw came out. We started maybe playing to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people ourselves, and then we got asked to go and play with U2 in stadiums around Europe. It's a big learning curve. And you could turn up, you could play, and then you could go back to the hotel or go out in the city that you're in. But why would you do that? You've got U2 to watch.
Yeah.
I watched every single show. Well, all of us watched every single show.
Over and over.
Just taking notes and stuff, like how does Bono make, because watched in different places in the stadium each night. So watching up close one night, watching from the sound desk another night, watching from the back of the stadium one night, and standing at the back going, how are they making it feel like I'm in the front row? Wow. And just being able to talk to them and going like, well, how do you do this? What do you do? And it was a crash course in how to play to a big audience.
Masterclass. And
and we varying degrees of success on that tour, but by the time we played the 360 tour, I had the whole stadium like clapping along to our songs, whether they heard them or not. And it felt like because of that, I learned how to I'm not talking about like manipulation. I'm talking about unifying people through music. I want everyone to have fun. And if you don't want to clap along, that's okay. But like it's trying to get everybody into the mindset of we're all here together to watch a show.
I'm watching you talking in the last 5 minutes about the gigs, and I feel like I could hear the roar of the crowd as you're describing it. And you look, as we're about to leave after having a very lengthy, most enjoyable conversation, like you want to leap off that chair and go on stage and start rocking out, because this is your thing. I mean, you're giddy. You look like you're a 21-year-old talking about the music there. Like
Absolutely.
It's like, woof.
Absolutely, but you brought me down there with mostly enjoyable, because I'll be thinking about that for the rest of the day, which Missy didn't enjoy.
Most enjoyable, not mostly.
I thought you said mostly enjoyable.
You see, that's we need to exchange therapist numbers. And
yes, this is the thing. This is the thing, and that's what we. That's a whole other podcast.
You heard that?
That's a whole other podcast. That's my brain.
What a shambles!
It's in the book.
What a shambles!
Yeah, it's a fucking shambles.
Gary Lightbody, what a pleasure.
It was mostly a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I mostly enjoy your music, but depends on the day. Congratulations on everything. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Ryan. It was an absolute delight. It really was.
And there you have it. Another packed episode with some great book recommendations for you to enjoy, all brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. Shop in your local Eason store or explore hundreds of thousands of titles online at easons.com. Order before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch and enjoy free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.